The year I hated Lucas Carter the most was also the purest. Lucas Carter tortured and killed my dog that I had raised for 10 years, all for his little secretary. To get revenge, I stabbed the little secretary 5 times, relishing her crazed screams. Everyone thought Lucas Carter would take my life. Instead, Lucas Carter just threw me a divorce agreement and said coldly, "You're nothing but a dog of the Carter family. Since you want to go mad, then get lost." After that night, I never appeared again. Until 5 years later, I attended a gala in my father's place and ran into Lucas Carter's little secretary. The little secretary splashed red wine on me. Well, look who it is. The dog the Carter family didn't want. I grabbed a champagne bottle and smashed it on the little secretary's head. 5 years and they still haven't taught you how to be human. Today I'll teach you myself. Yolanda's screams echoed through the room. Several lackeys standing beside Yolanda immediately positioned themselves in front of her and shouted at me. "Who the fuck are you? Do you know who you just hit?" "Let me tell you," the loudest one pointed at me. "She's the fiancée of the Carter Corporation's heir. You've crossed her. Mr. Carter won't let you go." Someone else blocked my path, speaking mockingly. "I'd like to see which blind fool dares to offend Mr. Carter's precious darling. Everyone knows Mr. Carter is crazy about his wife. Normally, if Miss Yolanda loses even a single hair, Mr. Carter would turn half the city upside down, let alone crack her head open." Yolanda covered her bleeding forehead, glaring at me viciously. "Let me tell you, Gardenia. I was kind enough to let you go 5 years ago. But that doesn't mean I'll still be afraid of you 5 years later. You were nothing but a dog Asher kept at home. 5 years ago I could destroy you. And now that you dare to show up, I can destroy you again." I looked at how Yolanda had changed over 5 years. I had to admit it. Lucas Carter really had raised her well. The woman who could only timidly call me Mrs. Carter back then could now publicly threaten me to disappear, using words like destroy. Unfortunately, I've never been a pushover. Not 5 years ago. Not 5 years later either. Surrounded by a crowd, I looked at the shattered fragments on the ground, bent down, and under everyone's shocked expressions, picked up a shard and smiled. "Yolanda." I walked toward her step by step. 5 years ago. I held the bloodstained shard. "I gave you too much face." "What?" I stared at Yolanda's lower abdomen, tracing the shard from her face downward. "I stabbed out your uterus back then, and you still haven't learned your lesson." "In that case." My smile turned vicious, and before anyone could react, I raised the shard and stabbed it fiercely toward Yolanda's abdomen. But before I could stab Yolanda's belly, someone suddenly grabbed my wrist. I heard screaming in my ears and Yolanda's tearful voice. "Asher." "I'm scared." 5 years ago, when I had pressed Yolanda to the ground and stabbed her again and again, Yolanda had shown the same terrified eyes, calling out vulnerably, "Asher, I'm scared." Time overlapped. Behind me came a long-lost yet familiar voice. "Gardenia, it's been 5 years. What?" Lucas Carter's voice was gloomy. "Still haven't learned to behave?" My wrist was forcefully pulled outward. The pain made me frown, but instead of admitting defeat and giving up like I did 5 years ago, it ignited the blood in my veins that couldn't be contained. I gripped the shard tightly, feeling it pierce my palm, and at the same moment Lucas Carter was about to seize the shard from me. I quickly turned my head and smiled at Lucas Carter. "Long time no see. Asher." The shard stabbed viciously into Lucas Carter's arm, blood spattering and blurring my vision. The scene descended into complete chaos. I heard countless screams in my ears, someone shouting for security, and people whispering in discussion. Who is this woman? Does she have a death wish? She actually dared to stab Mr. Carter. I just heard Miss Yolanda mention 5 years ago. 5 years ago didn't Mr. Carter drive away a Carter family orphan girl, his wife in name only? Holy shit, could it be her? She doesn't look like it though. I heard that orphan girl had no one, just a dog that was tortured to death all night, because it offended Miss Yolanda. Everyone in high society has seen that torture video. They even skinned the dog alive. Look, Mr. Carter is actually smiling. Blood kept seeping from Lucas Carter's arm. Yolanda shouted, "Asher." Then, ignoring her own forehead wound, Yolanda rushed over to Lucas Carter like a madwoman, shielding him and yelling at me. "Gardenia, what gives you the right to hurt Asher? The Carter family raised you for 20 years and raised an ungrateful wretch like you. Apologize to Asher right now." Watching Yolanda act like the mistress of the Carter family, ordering me around imperiously, I found it laughable. I met Lucas Carter's eyes. "After raising her for 5 years, you've raised a dog that stands up for you. Lucas Carter, you must feel pretty satisfied." Yolanda's face paled. Lucas Carter immediately shielded Yolanda behind him, just like 5 years ago. "Gardenia, things between us ended 5 years ago. I've already told you Yolanda is the only one in my heart. I won't fall in love with you and I could never like you." Lucas Carter looked at me coldly. "I don't care how you've spent these 5 years, or how you got an invitation to this gala and snuck in. But I will never let you return to the Carter family and continue to harm Yolanda. Gardenia. Lucas Carter looked down at me from above. Originally today I could have ignored you and pretended you didn't exist, but since you hurt Yolanda, you have to pay the price. Lucas Carter clapped his hands, and a group of security guards surrounded me. You can choose to do it yourself or I'll do it. A security guard handed over a knife. Lucas Carter took it, waiting for my answer. I just laughed outright. Lucas Carter, do you think the whole world revolves around you? I pointed at the knife in his hand. If you've got the guts, you'd better finish me off today. I walked closer step by step. Otherwise, when it's my turn to finish you off, you'd better not. I leaned close to Lucas Carter, enunciating clearly. Beg for mercy on your knees. Uh-huh. My laughter echoed through the silent banquet hall. Lucas Carter's expression darkened. Watching Lucas Carter tremble with rage, I couldn't help but recall 5 years ago when he did the same thing, using Rusty to force me to kneel and kowtow in apology. He locked Rusty in an iron cage, had someone seal Rusty's mouth, and as long as I refused to beg for mercy, the blade would mercilessly slice across Rusty's body. All my pride was completely shattered. Watching Rusty in agony, I knelt and begged for mercy. Lucas Carter. I cried and pleaded, don't hurt Rusty. I'm sorry. I kowtowed forcefully, banging my head hard on the ground. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Rusty was all I had. My only hope was to take Rusty and leave the Carter family. I desperately begged. Let Rusty go, let Rusty go. I'll never forget Rusty's eyes full of heartache for me. Nor will I forget the hatred carved into my bones that still fills me with rage when I remember it. Looking at Lucas Carter now, only the hatred that hasn't completely burned out remains. Lucas Carter, you're nothing but a dog being played by Yolanda, I said word by word. Old Master Carter handed the Carter family over to you, and he'll probably crawl out of his coffin to demand your life. After all, the Carter family is completely finished. My throat was violently seized. My breath was stolen. Oxygen gradually depleted. I met Lucas Carter's bloodshot eyes and heard his voice, vicious to the point of madness. Gardenia, don't think I won't dare kill you. You're nothing but the Carter family's dog. Lucas Carter forcefully threw me to the ground. Champagne glass shards all pierced my skin, creating countless small wounds. The pain made me shudder. And then Lucas Carter grabbed my hair. When I tell you to kneel, you kneel. When I tell you to die, you die. Lucas Carter smiled at me. But today, I don't really want you to die. After all, Lucas Carter patted my face. Such a good plaything. How could I let it die so easily? Don't you agree? I looked at Lucas Carter so close. I remembered that day when Yolanda sent me a video, her tone boastful. I just told Asher that Rusty scared me, and Asher skinned Rusty alive. You know what? Next time I'll tell Asher that you're actually scary too. Will Asher skin you alive too? So funny. You're nominally Mrs. Carter, but you're actually worth less than a servant. Now meeting Lucas Carter's expression, a sweetness rose in my throat. As Lucas Carter raised his hand to slap my face again, I spat a mouthful of bloody phlegm onto his face. Watching his expression shift from brief shock to disgusted revulsion, I smiled. That's right, Lucas Carter. How could you die so quickly? I used his tone and smiled too. After all, such a fun game. How can we not play it to the end? Since I came back, I never intended to let Carter Corporation go. Those who killed Rusty back then, I want them all to pay the price one by one. Rusty died so cruelly. How could I let them go? Seeing my stubborn defiance, Lucas Carter suddenly released my hair and wiped the bloody phlegm from his face. That's right. Some things, if you don't torture them slowly, how can you be satisfied? Since you've come back, Lucas Carter looked at me. Then let's play properly. Lucas Carter stopped looking at me and ordered the security guards. Watch her. Don't let her escape. Then Lucas Carter returned to his gentle and considerate demeanor toward Yolanda. Does it hurt? He gently wiped away Yolanda's tears. I'll take you to a private room. Yolanda cried into his arms. With you I don't hurt. With you here, Yolanda sobbed. I'm not afraid of anything. I watched Lucas Carter carry Yolanda horizontally out of the room. I slumped to the ground, the tiny wounds all over my body making me frown in pain. Those sycophants around me started spewing. Who knows where this thing came from, daring to hurt Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter not taking half your life today is already mercy. Get lost. Exactly. I heard before that you're just an orphan girl old Master Carter picked up from outside. Old Master Carter raised you, but you repaid kindness with enmity and went after Miss Yolanda. You deserve to be kicked out. Not gonna lie, someone smiled and opened their phone. I still have that dog's torture video saved. That person opened their album and found the torture video. The others gathered around saying, let me see. I want to see too. Rusty's screams rang out, but I seemed stimulated, directly picked up a shard from the ground, grabbed that person's hair, and stabbed it viciously into his eye. Screams pierced my ears. I was like someone appreciating a work of art. Turning my head to see those who had just been pointing fingers at me all fall silent. No one dared to provoke a lunatic. Moreover, a lunatic like me who dared to take the life of the Carter family's heir. Even the security guards didn't dare to really lay hands on me. I looked at this group of sycophants, spat out a mouthful of bloody phlegm, threw out the word trash, and headed in Lucas Carter's direction. Lucas Carter brought Yolanda to a private room and called his personal doctor. The doctor carefully examined Yolanda's wound, but Yolanda cried and said, "Don't look at me, Check Asher." I really didn't expect, Yolanda choked up, that Gardenia would be even crazier 5 years later. We shouldn't have been soft-hearted back then. She's appearing here now because she can't let you go. Back then, Gardenia loved you so much that the whole city knew. Just because you were a little nice to me, she publicly embarrassed me and even slapped me. Yolanda wiped away her tears. Asher, don't let her destroy our relationship anymore, okay? Lucas Carter sat at the bedside, held Yolanda's hand, and softly comforted her. I won't. Don't worry. To me, Lucas Carter scoffed, Gardenia is nothing but a toy. When we were young, I found her boring and would always lock her in the dark room, scare her with snakes and insects and rats, and found it interesting to hear her cry. Later, I discovered Gardenia fed stray dogs every day, so I poisoned several of them. She actually pulled a knife on me over some beasts. Lucas Carter gritted his teeth. That dog deserved to die. I walked to the private room door and heard Lucas Carter say this. I remembered that time when Lucas Carter chained me up. For 3 whole days, Lucas Carter left me covered in injuries. Even so, Lucas Carter had the audacity to grab my throat and demand, "Don't take medicine." I still clearly remember Lucas Carter's sick and obsessed eyes. Since playing with you isn't enough, then give birth to my spawn. I want to see if you'll still have such a hard backbone when you're carrying my spawn. Later, it was Rusty who found the old master to rescue me. It was Rusty who accompanied me to the hospital, completely eliminating the possibility of me becoming a mother. Even if I could never be a mother for the rest of my life, I would never give birth to spawn carrying Lucas Carter's blood. It was also then. Lucas Carter completely developed murderous intent toward Rusty. My phone vibrated. I looked at the caller and my expression softened. You went to the gala in place of your father-in-law? That person's tone was gentle. I heard your ex-husband is there too. Why didn't you wait for me? Hearing that person's voice, I couldn't help but complain. I'm about to be killed. Before I die, come save me quick. I hung up the phone. I heard Yolanda ask him, what if Gardenia still wants to be with you? Before Lucas Carter could answer, I kicked the door open directly, met Yolanda's shocked face, and Lucas Carter immediately shielded Yolanda. Gardenia, you really are shameless. Chasing us here. Lucas Carter looked at me with satisfaction. What, want to come back and be Mrs. Carter? Who do you think you are? I picked up the knife in my hand, rushed quickly to Lucas Carter, stabbed it into his abdomen, and looked at him coldly with a sneer. Lucas Carter. Go to hell. The knife sank into Lucas Carter's abdomen with a wet, heavy thud. For a second, the room was so quiet that the only sound was the drip of blood onto the plush Persian rug. Lucas's eyes dilated, his face instantly draining of color. He looked down at the handle protruding from his pristine white shirt, then slowly raised his head to look at me. His expression wasn't one of anger. It was sheer, frozen disbelief. Gardenia. He gasped, his hand rising to clutch his stomach. Blood, dark and hot, immediately began to seep through his fingers, staining his shirt a violent crimson. You actually. Asher. Yolanda's voice rose to a shrill, glass-shattering shriek. She threw herself toward Lucas, her hands trembling as she tried to support him, but Lucas's knees had already buckled. He collapsed heavily against the edge of the mahogany desk, knocking over a crystal vase that shattered onto the floor. Get out. Yolanda screamed at the door, her eyes wild with terror. Security. Doctors. Someone kill her. She's trying to murder him. I stood there, my hand still warm from the hilt of the knife. I didn't run. I didn't even step back. I watched the blood flow from Lucas's wound, feeling a strange, hollow satisfaction blooming in my chest. 5 years. For 5 years, I had woken up in the middle of the night to the sound of Rusty's whimpering. For 5 years, I had carried the invisible scars of the skinning knife on my own soul. Gardenia, you lunatic. Yolanda hissed, her face contorted in a mix of fury and fear. She pressed her hand over Lucas's wound, but the blood quickly soaked through her palms. You're finished. Do you hear me? The Carter family will have you locked in a dark room until you rot. You'll never see the light of day again. Let them try, I said, my voice incredibly calm. I wiped a stray drop of blood from my cheek with the back of my hand. I've already been in the dark room. Yolanda, it's not as scary as you think. Lucas let out a low, rattling groan. His grip on the desk slipped and he slid to his knees on the floor. Even in his semi-conscious state, his eyes remained locked on me, not with the cold arrogance of a master looking at his dog, but with a desperate, suffocating panic. Why? Lucas choked out, a thin trickle of blood appearing at the corner of his mouth. Gardenia, why won't you just be good? Because my name is Gardenia, I whispered, kneeling down so my face was level with his. Not Rusty, and certainly not your plaything. Before Yolanda could scream again, the door of the private room was kicked open. For the second time tonight. But it wasn't the hotel security. A dozen men in identical, tailored charcoal suits poured into the room, instantly forming a wall of solid muscle between me and the rest of the world. At the head of them walked a man whose presence immediately made the air in the room feel heavy, almost unbreathable. Julian Vance. He was dressed in a dark midnight blue suit, his silver tie clip catching the light of the chandelier. His face was a masterpiece of cold, sharp angles, his eyes as dark and deep as the midnight ocean. He didn't look at Lucas, nor did he look at the screaming Yolanda. His gaze found me instantly. I told you to wait for me in the car, Julian said, his voice low, smooth, and carrying a dangerous, quiet authority. I stood up, dusting off my skirt. The party was getting boring. I wanted to see some old friends. Julian walked over to me, ignoring the pools of blood on the floor. He pulled a silk handkerchief from his pocket and gently grabbed my hand, wiping the crimson stains from my palm where the shard had cut me earlier. His touch was incredibly gentle, a stark contrast to the absolute ruthlessness of his reputation. Mr. Vance. Yolanda gasped, her voice instantly losing its arrogant edge, replaced by a trembling, desperate panic. Mr. Vance, please. Look what she did. To Asher. She stabbed him. You're a partner of the Carter Group, you have to. Julian slowly turned his head. His eyes, when they fell on Yolanda, were so cold. They could have frozen water in midair. The Carter Group? Julian murmured, his tone light, almost amused. As of 10 minutes ago, the Vance Corporation has liquidated all assets associated with the Carter Group. And as for your fiancé. He glanced down at Lucas, who was clutching his bleeding stomach on the floor, looking up at Julian with a mixture of agony and realization. Mr. Carter seems to have met with a very unfortunate accident, Julian said, smoothly. A workplace hazard, perhaps. You. Lucas croaked, his eyes wide with a sudden, horrifying comprehension. Julian Vance, you're the one who backed her. She is my wife, Lucas, Julian said, his hand sliding down to interlace his fingers with mine, his grip firm and protective. And in my family we don't allow our property to be touched, let alone our people. The news of the stabbing at the Grand Hyatt was completely suppressed within 30 minutes. No police cars arrived with sirens blaring, no journalists gathered at the gates. In our world, true power doesn't make noise. It operates in the dark. Julian's private medical team handled Lucas's wound right there in the hotel suite, ensuring he wouldn't die, not out of mercy, but because a dead Lucas Carter was far less useful to us than a living, suffering one. By the next morning, the Carter Group stock had plunged by 15%. How is he? I asked, sitting on the plush leather sofa of Julian's penthouse suite, looking out over the misty skyline of the city. I was holding a cup of hot black tea, the warmth seeping into my cold fingers. Julian walked into the living room, wearing a simple black silk robe. He carried a tablet, which he set on the table in front of me. He survived the surgery, Julian said, sitting down beside me and pulling me into his side. His arm was warm and solid around my shoulders. The knife missed his portal vein by 2 millimeters. He'll be hospitalized for at least 3 weeks. 2 millimeters, I murmured, a touch of disappointment in my voice. My aim was off. Julian let out a low, dark chuckle, his lips pressing against my temple. It's better this way, Gardenia. If he died yesterday, the Carter Group would have inherited his shares to his uncles, and the company would have been divided. This way, we can dismantle it piece by piece while he's too weak to fight back. He tapped the screen of the tablet. This was uploaded to every major social media platform and news outlet 5 minutes ago. I looked at the screen. It was the video Yolanda had sent me 5 years ago, the one of Rusty. But this time, it wasn't just a low-resolution file sent to a single phone. It had been enhanced, the faces of the people holding the knives clearly visible, under the bright lights of the Carter family's private kennel. Yolanda's face, twisted in a sadistic, laughing sneer, was front and center. Beside her was Lucas, holding the leash, his expression completely indifferent. As my dog's screams echoed in the background, the caption above the video was simple, yet devastating. The true face of the Carter Group. Torture, abuse, and the murder of an innocent life. Is this the company you trust with your investments? The public backlash is already catastrophic, Julian said, his voice smooth and cold. The animal welfare organizations have already called for a total boycott of all Carter Group malls and hotels. The municipal government is being forced to launch an investigation into the private kennel on the Carter estate. I stared at the screen, my heart aching with a familiar, heavy grief, but this time, the grief was accompanied by a sharp, burning satisfaction. And Yolanda? I asked. She's currently hiding in her private apartment, Julian replied. The media has surrounded the building. She can't leave without being pelted with eggs and garbage. Her endorsements have been canceled, and her fashion line has been pulled from every department store in the country. I closed my eyes, leaning my head against Julian's chest. This is just the beginning, I whispered. I want her to feel what it's like to be hunted, to have nowhere to run. She will, Julian promised, his hand gently stroking my hair. I've already bought the debt on her apartment building. By tomorrow afternoon she will be evicted. The rain was pouring down on the city, turning the streets into a slick gray mirror. Yolanda pulled her hood tightly over her head, her face buried in a thick woolen scarf to hide her identity. She carried 2 heavy designer suitcases, her fingers chapped and red from the cold. Please, she sobbed into her phone, her voice shaking with panic. Asher, you have to help me. The landlord just locked me out of my apartment. He said my lease was terminated because of reputational damage to the building. Where do I go? The reporters are everywhere. On the other end of the line, Lucas's voice was weak, interrupted by the steady beeping of a heart monitor. I can't, Yolanda. Lucas gasped, his voice raspy from the anesthesia. The board of directors. They stripped me of my executive powers this morning. My uncle has taken over the chair. The bank. They've frozen my personal accounts, pending the investigation. No, Yolanda shrieked, stopping in a dark alleyway to shield herself from the downpour. That's impossible. You're Lucas Carter. You own this city. How can they freeze your accounts? It's Julian Vance, Lucas gritted out, his tone filled with a deep, hopeless rage. He's destroying us. Because of Gardenia. That bitch. Yolanda screamed, her face contorting in a mask of pure, ugly fury. I should have killed her 5 years ago. I should have skinned her along with her stupid dog. I wouldn't say that if I were you, Yolanda. The cold, clear voice sounded from the entrance of the alley. Yolanda jumped, her phone slipping from her fingers and splashing into a puddle. She spun around, her eyes wide with terror. I stood there, holding a black umbrella, dressed in a flawless cream-colored cashmere coat. Behind me stood 2 of Julian's bodyguards, their faces expressionless under the streetlights. Gardenia. Yolanda gasped, backing away until her spine hit the brick wall of the building. What? What do you want? Haven't you done enough? You ruined my career. You took my apartment. I took your apartment? I laughed, a quiet, mocking sound that was swallowed by the rain. Yolanda, you lived in that luxury penthouse for 5 years using the money the Carter family stole from my grandfather's estate. I didn't take your apartment. I simply recovered my property. I took a step closer, the tip of my umbrella scraping against the wet asphalt. Do you remember what you said to me 5 years ago? I asked, my voice dropping into a soft, deadly whisper. You said, next time I'll tell Asher that you're actually scary too. Will Asher skin you alive too? Yolanda began to shake violently, her hands clutching her chest as if she could protect herself from the memories of her own cruelty. I was joking. It was just a joke. Asher was the one who did it. He's the one who ordered the kennel master to do it. He did it for you, I said, stopping just 2 feet away from her. Because you told him my dog scared you. Because you wanted to see me crawl on my knees and beg. I reached out, my gloved hand grabbing her chin, forcing her to look into my eyes. So now, let's see if your Asher will crawl for you. What? What are you going to do to him? She whimpered. Nothing, I smiled. I'm going to let you do it. I let go of her chin, pulling a heavy, white document from my coat pocket and tossing it onto her wet suitcases. This is a confession, I said, detailing how you pressured Lucas to torture my dog and how you embezzled $3 million from the Carter Group's charity fund over the last 3 years to pay off your family's debts. Yolanda's face turned completely gray. I didn't embezzle. The bank records say otherwise. I interrupted. If you sign this and hand it to the prosecutor, you will get 5 years in a minimum security facility. But if you don't, I leaned in, my breath hot against her cold ear. I will make sure the public finds out exactly which alleyway you are sleeping in tonight. Yolanda looked at the document, then at the dark, empty street ahead. She knew. She had no choice. She had been a parasite her entire life, feeding off Lucas's power. Now that the host was dying, she had to consume herself to survive. With trembling hands, she picked up the pen I offered and signed her name on the dotted line. The trial of Yolanda Vance. She had legally changed her name to Vance in a desperate bid to associate herself with Julian's family before the collapse, was the biggest scandal of the year. The court was packed with reporters, their flashbulbs illuminating the dark wooden benches of the courtroom. Yolanda sat at the defense table, her hair messy, her designer clothes replaced by a simple prison-issued gray jumpsuit. She looked 30 years older, her eyes hollow, her hands shaking as the judge read the verdict. For the charges of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit animal cruelty, the judge declared, his voice booming through the silent room. The court sentences the defendant to 7 years of federal imprisonment, with no possibility of parole. Yolanda let out a choked, desperate sob, her head collapsing onto the table as the bailiff stepped forward to cuff her. I sat in the gallery, my hand resting in Julian's. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. This was just the first name on my list. After the court cleared, Julian and I walked down the stone steps of the courthouse, where a black limousine was waiting. Where to? Julian asked, his voice warm as he pulled a blanket over my lap. The Carter family estate, I said, looking out the window at the gray sky. It's time to visit the old home. The Carter estate, once a symbol of the city's highest nobility, was now in a state of decay. The grand iron gates were rusted, the manicured lawns overgrown with weeds. The servants had all been dismissed, leaving the vast, empty mansion to rot in the rain. We walked into the grand parlor, our footsteps echoing off the high, vaulted ceilings. And there, sitting in a wheelchair in front of the empty fireplace, was Lucas. He had lost weight, his face pale and sunken, his eyes bloodshot. A thick, dark blanket was draped over his legs, and his left arm was heavily bandaged from the surgery. You came, Lucas whispered, his voice raspy, his gaze slowly rising to meet mine. Gardenia, you came to see my ruin. I came to see my house, I said, looking around the room. The bank foreclosed on this property this morning, Lucas. The Vance Corporation bought the deed. As of tomorrow, this house will be demolished. Lucas let out a low, dry laugh that turned into a hacking cough. Demolished. My grandfather's house. The house where we grew up. The house where you locked me in the dark room with snakes and rats. I corrected him, stepping closer to his wheelchair. The house where you let your secretary carve my dog to pieces. There is no nobility in this house, Lucas. Only rot. I loved you, Gardenia, Lucas suddenly said, his voice rising in a desperate, cracked tone. He reached out with his good hand, trying to grab the hem of my coat. In my own way, I loved you. I was angry. You always looked at me with such disgust. You always looked at those stray dogs with more warmth than you ever gave me. You wanted a slave, Lucas, I said, stepping back so his hand fell empty into the air. Not a wife. You wanted someone you could break, someone who would crawl back to you no matter how much you hurt them. But you forgot one thing. I knelt down, looking into his pathetic, weeping face. I was raised by old Master Carter. He taught me how to run an empire. He didn't teach me how to be a dog. Julian walked up behind me, his hand resting on my shoulder, his presence a solid, unyielding wall of support. The police are waiting outside, Mr. Carter, Julian said smoothly. The municipal government has completed its investigation into the private kennel. They found the remains of over 40 animals on this property. You are being charged with multiple counts of felony animal abuse, as well as the illegal confinement of Gardenia 5 years ago. Lucas's eyes widened in horror. Confinement? That was a domestic dispute. A domestic dispute doesn't involve locking a human being in a steel cage for 3 days without medical attention, Julian said, his voice flat and cold. The medical records from 5 years ago have been recovered from the hospital archive. You will spend the next 10 years in a state penitentiary, Lucas. And I can assure you, the other inmates will not be as gentle as your wife was. Lucas stared at us, his lips trembling violently as the reality of his absolute ruin finally settled over him. He was the heir of the Carter family. He had been a king. Now he was just a broken man in a wheelchair, waiting for the police to drag him into the dark. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clear, blue sky that reflected off the quiet waters of the bay. I stood in the center of the newly constructed animal sanctuary on the outskirts of the city. The green lawns were filled with running, playing dogs, strays that had been rescued from the streets, now safe and cared for by a team of professional caretakers. In the center of the park stood a beautiful, bronze statue of a golden retriever, its eyes looking up at the sky with a warm, loyal expression. On the base of the statue, the inscription read, "For Rusty, you taught me how to survive the dark. Now you can run free in the light." I knelt down, resting my hand against the cold bronze of the statue's paw. "We did it, Rusty," I whispered, a tear finally escaping my eye and sliding down my cheek. They can never hurt you again. A soft, warm coat was draped over my shoulders. I looked up. Julian was standing beside me, his dark eyes filled with a deep, silent tenderness. He reached down, wiping the tear from my cheek with his thumb, before pulling me up into his arms. Are you ready to go home? Julian asked softly. I looked back at the sanctuary, at the dogs playing in the grass, and then at the strong, loving man beside me. The pain of the past 5 years would never completely vanish. The scars on my heart were permanent. But as I leaned against Julian's chest, watching the sun set over the bay, I realized that the revenge was complete. The monsters were in their cages, and I was finally truly free.